Let's dive into the next eerie tale. His pseudonym is Li, and we'll call him Zhao Li. Zhao Li is from Shaozhou, Guangdong, and he's constantly traveling between Shenzhen and Shaozhou for his business. In Chaoshan culture, there's a very famous folk tradition related to the local ghost festival. In the Chaoshan region, there's another extremely important ghost festival that everyone knows about. It falls on the 6th day of the 6th lunar month. You can really see how different northern and southern cultures are. On this day, there are many taboos in the Chaoshan area. For example, on the 6th day of the 6th lunar month, you shouldn't visit relatives or friends because you might bring bad luck to their homes. And minors should avoid going out at night. Even if adults have to go out, they shouldn't camp in the wild. Of course, these customs aren't as strict today, but every native Chaoshan person will mention the 6th day of the 6th lunar month in Shaozhou. You can see how deeply this folk tradition has influenced the Chaoshan region. Locals in Shaozhou refer to the period from the 6th day of the 6th lunar month to the 15th day of the 7th lunar month, the Hungry Ghost Festival, as Ghost Month. In the past, during Ghost Month, no celebrations were held to avoid any trouble. And on the 6th day of the 6th lunar month, every household in Shaozhou would stick peach and willow branches outside their doors and windows. As you know, peach trees are believed to ward off evil spirits. When did this story happen? July 27, 2009. A Monday. It was the year of the ox, the month of Xinwei, and the day of Gui You, which is the 6th day of the 6th lunar month. Zhao Li's uncle, whom we'll call Uncle Li, was a police officer at Alakao police station. He was still pretty young then, not even 40 years old. And that night, it just so happened that Uncle Li was on duty at the police station. Uncle Li suddenly received 2 emergency calls back to back. The first call was from a student's parent, reporting that their daughter hadn't come home yet, despite it being very late. They described the girl's age, school, class, uniform, appearance. She had 2 braids around face and wore glasses. The details were all clearly communicated to the police. Just moments after hanging up, another call came in. This time, it was from a female teacher at the school, saying that 3 female students from her class hadn't returned home either. The parents were frantic and had called her, so she was also very worried. She described the 3 girls, what they were wearing, their names and their appearances. Coincidentally, one of the girls was the same one from the first call. It was already late at midnight, and 2 reports involving underage girls not returning home were alarming. Considering it was also the 6th day of the 6th lunar month, the police, though they couldn't openly mention it, decided to send 2 officers to investigate. One was Uncle Li, and the other was an experienced veteran officer, Officer Chen. The 2 officers, one young and one old, seasoned, drove to the scene. Initially, they visited the homes of the missing children to gather more information. The 3 girls were classmates from the same high school, and they hadn't returned home after school let out. The parents were extremely worried. After understanding the situation, the officers immediately headed to the school. This high school was also Zhao Li's alma mater, and was quite famous in Shaozhou, mainly because it used to be right next to a funeral home. The school was separated from the funeral home only by a short wall. In 2007, the funeral home had moved, and the land was purchased by the school, which built a new teaching building on that plot. The acquisition of the land had been quite a process, and there had been many rumors and strange stories circulating during that time. Both Uncle Li and Officer Chen were locals and very familiar with the school's history. When they arrived at the school gate, they saw a man and a woman standing there. One appeared to be a female teacher, and the other was an elderly man. As soon as the 2 officers pulled up, the teacher quickly approached them and greeted them. After getting out of the car, the officers asked the 2 individuals, who turned out to be the girls' class teacher and the school's gatekeeper. The teacher, a woman in her early 40s with short hair and large black-rimmed glasses, explained that she had received calls from the parents and was very worried about the 3 girls, who were close friends, but also known for being a bit rebellious. The teacher and the gatekeeper, who was in his 60s, had already searched the school thoroughly with flashlights, checking every classroom. but they hadn't found the girls. All the classrooms were locked, and they had no choice but to call the police for help. As the teacher, with her glasses slipping down her nose and pushing them back up with her right index finger, explained the situation, Uncle Lee glanced at his watch. It was about 10:55 p.m. Since it was a Monday, and the students had school the next day, the parents were extremely worried about the girls' safety, especially considering the date June 6th. Just as they were talking, Officer Chen suddenly called out and pointed towards the left side of the school. "Hey, there's light over there." Following his gesture, the four of them saw a faint, flickering light coming from a classroom on the third floor of the left building, as if someone had lit a candle inside. The teacher and the gatekeeper were puzzled. They had already searched that building and were sure it was empty. Nevertheless, to be certain, the four of them decided to check out the classroom. The two officers took the lead with the teacher, and the gatekeeper following behind as they entered the building. The hallway lights weren't motion activated, and they hadn't bothered to find the switch. The four of them, armed with 3 flashlights, made their way up the stairs to the third floor hallway. Uncle Lee took the lead as they approached the third floor corridor. He could distinctly hear hushed voices coming from one of the classrooms. Definitely the sound of girls whispering. He glanced back at Officer Chen, who nodded in confirmation. "The students must be in there. Let's hurry," he said. The teacher and the gatekeeper, hearing this, quickened their pace as well. They hurried along the corridor following the sound until they reached the classroom door. Uncle Lee, feeling something was off, shone his flashlight on the door. It was locked with a large padlock, but through the glass window on the door, he could see inside clearly. What he saw made him jump. There, kneeling on the floor in a triangular formation, were the 3 girls. They were leaning back, their left hands behind them, seemingly engaged in some mysterious activity. The teacher, upon seeing this, was horrified. She shouted the girls' names from the hallway, demanding to know what they were doing. The gatekeeper, realizing the door was locked, quickly fumbled for his keys and unlocked it. As soon as the door was open, the 4 of them entered the room. Officer Chen immediately turned on the classroom lights. Uncle Lee saw the 3 girls all in their school uniforms. One had long shoulder-length hair, another had a ponytail. The third girl facing the door had 2 braids, wore glasses, and had a round face, exactly matching the description from the first alarm call. The 2 girls with their backs to the door turned around, looking just as stunned as the third girl. In front of the podium, there was a small cleared space where the front row of desks and chairs had been pushed back. The 3 girls were kneeling there, with a piece of paper on the floor between them and an overturned dish on top of it. Uncle Lee noticed that the girls' right index fingers were all touching the dish. Their eyes closed, and they were muttering something under their breath. It was clear what they were doing. They were playing with a spirit board, so engrossed in their game that they hadn't noticed the flashlight outside or the teacher shouting. It was only when the gatekeeper unlocked the door and the lights were turned on that they were startled. The girls were completely bewildered, looking like they had been caught red-handed. The teacher was furious, berating the girls for their actions. "Do you have any idea what you're doing? It's so late, and your parents are frantic with worry. They've been searching for you and even called the police," she scolded, her glasses slipping down her nose as she pushed them back up with her right index hand. Officer Chen also reprimanded the girls, who hung their heads in silence, too scared to respond. But Uncle Lee remained quiet, observing the girls closely. He had many questions. How did they get into this classroom, which was locked from the outside? And what was written on the paper on the floor, with its neat circle and a small triangular stand holding up a small flashlight? The light from the old-fashioned flashlight cast an orange-yellow glow on the paper and the overturned dish. In the dim light, Uncle Lee saw a few drops of blood on the bottom of the dish. His heart skipped a beat. He thought to himself, "These kids are really pushing the limits, playing with a spirit board using blood on the night of June 6th. He was well aware of the history of this building. The left teaching building was built on the land that the school had purchased from the funeral home in 2007. There was something strange about the atmosphere. It was midsummer, and Chaoshan was known for its sweltering heat. But when they entered the room, Uncle Lee didn't feel the heat at all. Instead, He felt a chill that made him uncomfortable. The classroom was brightly lit, but it still felt eerie to him. He glanced at the gatekeeper, who stood there silent and frowning, staring at the paper. It was hard to tell what the old man was thinking. Officer Chen, perhaps trying to ease everyone's worries, said, "It's getting late. Let's wrap this up. The kids should go home and get some rest." He immediately contacted the station to inform them that the children had been found and to reassure the parents who had called in the first alarm. He then told the teacher, "You've had a tough night. Please contact the parents and let them know the kids are safe. We'll take the girls home now. We can sort everything out tomorrow." Throughout this process, the three girls remained silent and subdued, with their heads down and no response. When Uncle Li recounted the story to Zhao Li, he paused at this point, lit a cigarette, and took several deep puffs, looking quite troubled. Zhao Li, curious, urged him to continue. After a long drag on his cigarette, Uncle Li continued slowly. As they were preparing to leave with the three girls, the gatekeeper threw the paper and the dish into the trash can in the corner of the classroom. They turned off the lights, locked the door, and the seven of them began to head downstairs. The building's lights were not motion activated, so they still needed flashlights to navigate. The gatekeeper with his flashlight walked at the back. In front of him was Officer Chan, who used his flashlight to guide the three dejected girls. The teacher walked in front of the girls, holding the small flashlight that belonged to the students. The teacher kept thanking the two officers as they walked. "It's so late and I'm sorry to trouble you," she said. Uncle Li, walking alone at the front with his flashlight, felt a bit embarrassed and turned to respond politely. "It's nothing. It's our job as police officers. Don't worry as long as the students are safe." As he turned to speak, he suddenly noticed something odd. He had already reached the bottom of the staircase, while the others were still descending. Glancing back, he saw a pair of feet in flat shoes descending the stairs. The feet were walking on their tiptoes, with the heels lifted high and never touching the ground. The steps were slow and deliberate, with only the toes making contact. Uncle Li, being a police officer, was very observant of details. He immediately felt something was off. Normally, if someone walked on their tiptoes, the heels would move slightly due to the weight and the force of balancing on the toes. But the heels of these feet didn't move at all. It was as if the person was wearing invisible high heels, walking down the stairs on tiptoes.